This is Leaders in the Trenches, and your host today is Gene Hammett.
Hi, I'm Gene Hammett. I'm the host of Leaders in the Trenches, and my question for you today is, what are the behaviors that really align to the values of your company? The behaviors are what you would see. The behaviors are how people operate, the things that you're doing day in and day out. For example, one of your values may be excellence, providing excellence in your work or excellence in customer service, whatever it may be. Well, your version of excellence may be different than my version of excellence. But if we were working together, we could come up with a common bond around what are the behaviors that would be representative when we have excellence in that way. And that whole process is really something that will change the way you guys work together, your team, and you as a leader are able to really engage each other in making sure that you're aligning with the values of the company. Now, we've talked a lot about values on the show. We've talked a lot about this, but we have a very special guest today. Is it Brandon Hall? Brandon is with Pacific Digital Group, and he talks about how this company is organized around the behaviors that really do align to those values. So I share this with you because I really want you to understand how deep you can take this work of culture so that you can get the most out of it across the entire organization. Now, here's the interview with Brandon. Hi, Brandon. How are you?
Hi, Gene. How you doing? I'm doing super.
Well, it's exciting to have you here at Leaders in the Trenches.
I'm excited to be on. It's a great podcast. You've had some tremendous hosts. I feel like I'm joining outstanding, community here.
I'll brag for a second. You are. You really are. I'm really proud of the people that we've had on the show recently, and I'm not sure who you listen to, but maybe we'll dive into that a little bit. I've already introduced you to our audience, but I'd love for them to hear it in your own words. So tell us about who you are and who you serve in your current role.
Yep. Well, I'm the Vice President of Strategy and Sales with an agency and consultancy in San Diego called Pacific Digital Group. I've been there just under a year. I joined the original founder, who was a practitioner himself before becoming the CEO, as he founded this agency about 5 or 6 years ago. And we do work for large enterprise brands when it comes to discoverability online, brand campaigns, content campaigns, immersive content campaigns, and I spearhead all of our client work with that agency.
Well, one of the things that really sparked me about having you on the show is you've got about 65 people, right?
That's right. 65 employees. Kind of a small business. Yep.
And you had shared with me that, one of the topics of conversation every week happens to be culture. So yes. I don't want to kind of let the cat out of the bag a little bit, but why is culture something that you talk about every week?
Well, there's a number of reasons. Our founder himself, it's important to him. Every detail is important to him. He's kind of a design guy, Norman Bronze, and everything from the details of how our interior design is laid out and how it fosters innovation, how it fosters or sort of spurs that sort of collaboration is important to him. The way we work with our clients is highly collaborative, and we have found, I think he has found, and this is something that's been in my DNA as well, that if you don't have a culture that sort of, like I said, spurs that sort of interaction and that kind of creativity and innovation in your people, you're not likely to deliver much for your employees as well. So that's one reason. The other reason is retention of employees is an important one as well to us. I know that in the agency world, it's a high turnover world, and sometimes you'll gain somebody and train them a lot, and they'll do a great job for you, maybe 3 or 4 years, and they'll find a new opportunity. That's just sort of the nature of the beast. And yet we do everything that we can to retain our people by providing a work environment that's inclusive, collaborative, and really encourages people to push the envelope a bit.
Well, those are two topics that I talk about a lot. I go to a lot of conferences. I speak at a lot of conferences. I just happened to be back from the Great Places to Work conference. Have you ever heard of that one?
I haven't been to that one. I've heard of it, but I haven't been to that conference.
Pretty phenomenal group of speakers and attendees, and everybody's there is learning how to innovate. And I'm gonna share a stat with you just because I just thought it was pretty interesting. Companies that grow much faster when their employees experience a climate that encourages innovation. So the top 25% have a 26% higher growth rate than any of the other companies.
Just doesn't surprise me. Doesn't surprise me. And I think the reason it doesn't surprise me is the idea that you can map out your next 3 to 5 years as a business. I feel like that's just a misnomer. It can't be done. But you can foster an environment that encourages people to sort of test your assumptions about how you do what you do, how you differentiate, how you work with clients, no matter whether you're, it's a product or a service that you're offering, or you're a legacy company that's been around for decades, or a newer company. And I absolutely believe that you can foster an environment that causes people to bring their best, versus those where everything is everything is hierarchical and the decisions are going to be made by a small group of people and have to be validated by that team. So I absolutely believe that that's true.
I want to make sure we're clear on this, because I read this, off this report. This is only looking at just the top places to work. So this is not just every company across the board. This is the top 25% of the best 100.
Yeah.
And it's looking at their revenue growth is 26% higher in that top 25%. So when you think about innovation in your workforce, you mentioned something there about ideas and empowerment. How do you make sure that the best ideas come forth within the culture of the company?
Well, I think I've always felt there's numerous means to an end. I don't think that there's any one way that every company needs to embrace. I think that there are some principles that can apply from one workplace to another, or values even that can apply from one workplace to another that are important. And we have a list, for example, of expected behaviors. And it's sort of a whimsical, sort of a fun list of things that we all embrace as employees and as leaders in the company that make up, this is what it means to work for Pacific. And everything is in there, from the financial to the way we, interact with one another as employees, to the ways we think, the ways we work with clients. And the idea is right out of the gates to let new employees know that we embrace that notion of, if nobody laughs at your ideas, for example, this is one of our values, then they're not big enough. You're not thinking big enough. And we want people to appreciate, even at the day one, really, that if you're not bringing something new to the table, you need to challenge that thinking yourself, and it's, I think it's encouraging and maybe even challenging every employee, it doesn't matter what their role is, to think about what they offer and their process for providing value inside the organization and outside the organization.
That's got to be fun to sit in a room where someone says, yeah, that's a pretty good idea, but it's not quite big enough.
Yeah. And it, like any company, I suspect, you create your expected behaviors, and maybe you need to make sure that you're living them every day. So we're challenged with that, just like any other company that aspires to great things, but always has to ask itself if it's actually living up to those things. So I'm not going to suggest that we have it all figured out, but it's I almost want to say it's fun. I'm old enough when I look for a fun workplace necessarily, but it is kind of energizing to be in an environment where you feel like, is this the best way we should be doing it? Maybe we need to pivot. Maybe we need to make an adjustment to how we do new business development, how we write up SOWs for clients, how we engage with those clients, how this team operates and interacts with this team. And I thrive in that environment. I like that kind of environment. And I think people like to know that they're working for an employer that's willing to adjust, adapt, and change.
I remember a conversation I had with a CEO of an Inc. 5000 level company, because I've had like 300 or more. And he said, if I have the best idea in the room, I haven't done my job as a leader.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you?
Well, I noticed this with our CEO, and he's a pretty creative guy. And while it's hard for him to do this, I do notice that he tries to speak last. For example, if we're in team meetings, group meetings, whether that's an executive leadership team meeting or a team meeting with others involved, he tries to make sure that his opinion is not, he holds back on sharing his opinion, so it doesn't sort of overshadow anything else that people might want to share. And I think that's an important value to hold, is that you trust and respect the opinions of others before you feel like you need to form yours or share yours with a larger group. Because CEOs and even any kind of departmental leader can really squelch that notion of new, fresh ideas by forcing their opinion out there too quickly, because they've already thought through it a little bit more. But giving people a chance to speak up with an idea that has been thrown out to them for the first time, I think that's a great way. I think that's a great way to foster that open dialogue and to force people to think a little bit more creatively before you've shared your opinion.
I want to go back to one of the things you said before, is having a list of values that everyone knows and operates by. You said values, but you also said we have behaviors. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people skip the behaviors side. So I don't know if it's something that you guys have recently done, or where did you get the fact that you needed to have clear behaviors that everyone operates that sit underneath the values?
Yeah, they've been in place for quite a while, actually. They predate me, and they were in place for at least a couple of years before me coming aboard. So they've been in place for some time. They do get tweaked here and there just for language purposes, for if the references that sometimes they're a little bit fun or whimsical, like I said before, and we have to make sure that they're relevant still today. But they've been around for a little while now, and I think it's because there's a good appreciation that it's one thing to hold on to a value or a philosophy about things. It's another thing to translate that into like a practical application of it. And we're constantly, I guess you could say, working on that as well. Do we actually practice what we preach? Do we live what we espouse as a value or a principle? And I think large organizations or small need to be thinking about that. It's one thing to have wonderful principles and values about inclusion and diversity and how we treat one another, how we treat clients, who comes first in that equation, all of that. It's another thing entirely to give people practical examples of how they make that happen in an organization.
It is. And I think a lot of people miss the whole step of going to the behaviors. I call this an operationalizing those values or principles. And it gives, because if we had a value of excellence, right? That's a common value across many companies. We strive for excellence, whatever your phraseology of that is. But that may mean something different to me and you. But when you actually have the behaviors, you get to become a common language amongst the people. Have you seen the value of that?
Absolutely. And I'm thinking of one of them in particular that we have as an expected behavior, and it's meeting deadlines. It's one thing to suggest that quality of work always needs to be outstanding. And of course, we believe in quality of work, but we also believe in meeting deadlines. And so it's important to get things done, get things, I guess I've heard it said outside of our company before, get it about right and on time. We want to do the best quality work that we can, but we also recognize that there are milestones and deadlines that have to be achieved as well. And so that's a big part of that. Do you stick to your deadlines to your colleagues, or are you kind of flaky when it comes to that? That's an important behavior that's a representation of excellence, in my opinion.
That's a good example. I want to switch gears a little bit, Brandon. When you think about being a consultancy or an agency working with clients, what within the culture allows you to best serve the client's needs and the results that they're looking for?
Well, every one of our clients that we work with has come to expect a regular cadence of communications. And they're very short-term in nature. They may work from a playbook that has a longer term in nature, but we work in quarterly increments with our clients, but with weekly check-ins and regular communications. And while I don't lead our client service team directly, I work with them well enough and regularly enough to see how that is valued by clients. And I don't know that our structure is a differentiator, but the manner in which we work to that structure is absolutely a differentiator versus other agencies. We work with clients extremely collaboratively, and it's based on their resources, their priorities, but it's also based on their ability from a staffing standpoint to execute certain things or have to dump them on our plate. So there's times that we're very strategic with clients, depending on their staffing, resources, and so forth, and their demands. But then there's times when we're very tactical with clients where they need us to be almost a direct extension of their team. And when things are being presented internally to executive sponsors and that sort of thing on the client side, our employees are mentioned as a part of the core team, even though we're the vendor or the agency or the partner, if you will. And I think that sort of flexible collaboration with clients, I think it's a difference maker for companies today. I love that we do it that way.
It's good when you have that, and there's a lot of pressure on you to create, since you're in VP of sales, to create those kind of relationships that allow for that level of partnership. Would you agree?
Yeah, totally agree. With my role being unique as a leading up the new business efforts and the ways we work with the existing clients when they want to expand their efforts and so forth, I have to be careful in my role that I don't overprescribe a solution for a client, for example, and allow our strategy and insights team to have that flexibility to implement solutions or to ideate with them or to brainstorm with clients, and not to implement something that I put in place, through my own team. And again, it's something I have to keep in check myself when I work with our team.
Well, I want to switch gears a little bit here, and we've been talking about culture and operationalizing, the values and all the behaviors that come out of that. What about the leadership, being you and also the CEO of the company, that really makes your organization work as efficiently as it does?
Yep. Well, I certainly can't take credit for that. We've got a CEO who's extremely receptive to feedback, who works really well with the rest of our executive leadership team, which includes our VP of marketing, our COO, and our CFO. And excuse me, I can tell you that our COO is it starts with the basis of trust, I guess. Before anything, before practices, strategies, operating plans for the year are put in place, it starts with, do you trust your team or not? And I know our COO, for example, Jeff Skyme, the way he works with his directors, the SEO team or the content team, creative team, that sort of thing, is also collaborative. It's sort of a representation of the model that we would hope that they would have with clients. And so there's this expectation that teams will lead, our directors will lead their teams in sort of that collaborative and discovery sort of way, so that we're not always the ones that have to set the tone. That's the hope, that's the expectation. And obviously some employees will run with it versus others who aren't used to that sort of flexibility. But it's really about making sure, and we meet every single week, every Monday afternoon, we have an executive leadership team meeting, and it is largely cultural in nature, talking about how do we unlock more in our team, how do we get out of their way more, and what is stifling that sort of innovation and creativity. And that meeting does not get postponed, it doesn't get canceled, it doesn't change too much from one week to the next.
I want to highlight something as we wrap up this conversation, Brendan. A lot of the conversation is about how you remove things from culture and leadership and operations. It's not, I'm sure you're adding things to it, but I've seen this with a lot of my clients. A lot of that is just, what do you remove?
Yep.
I've got interviews today where companies are talking about interesting things they've removed, like working on Fridays. Removing working through Slack and how that works. Can you give me just a quick example of something you guys have removed and the impact that's had?
Yeah, so the most recent one is all of our meeting calendars, all of our one-on-ones that we do, and our skip level meetings that happen in our agency. All of our recurring meetings besides those meetings were all required to be changed from defaults of 1 hour. If it's a 1 hour meeting, it's defaulted now to either 45 minutes or 50 minutes. And if it's a 30-minute meeting, switch it to a 25 or 20-minute meeting. That notion that you're going to use the 30 minutes or the 60 minutes because it's on the calendar that way is kind of a silly one. And we've done what we can to sort of get off of that horse where we feel like, well, you got to have a 1 hour meeting every week with your direct reports. Why does it need to be a 1 hour meeting? Because that's how the calendar works, or because there's an hour's worth of things to talk about? It's often because of the former reason. So everybody, including me and with my own team, we made changes to all of our one-on-one meetings and all of our recurring meetings to be just a little bit shorter, so we can buy back a little bit more time for people to actually do the work and collaborate in a little bit more spontaneous or organic ways rather than these rigid schedules.
I want to share with you as this final bit. One of my clients was struggle with meetings, just when we get the work done. And through the coaching, and I just kind of said, well, why do you have to have meetings every day of the week? Why not have a day for just working? And he's like, can you do that? Could we do that? And I'm like, you can do whatever you want. And we talked back and forth, and literally Wednesday was the day. And I was really nervous. I was like, because the first few weeks of that, even the first month, was like, I'm not sure this is working. And I checked in with them about a year later, and literally now it's Monday and Wednesdays, no meetings.
Wow.
And so they figured out that, small things that you have to take away so that we can work better together. They can have one-on-one work sessions, but they don't have like meetings. And it's been crazy to see how that works. So Brandon, I really appreciate you being here at Leaders in the Trenches, and thanks for sharing me with your insights on leadership and culture.
Great show, Gene. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Well, I love this interview because it aligns to the work I do day in and day out with my clients. I didn't set this up. It just worked that way. But there is something to be said for going beyond just the values on the wall, or the values that you may have that your company is operating by, and the behaviors at which you are all seeing and representing inside of the workforce. Those behaviors, if you are really true to them, and you really have a common alignment amongst everyone, really can change the way you guys work together. So hopefully you've enjoyed this interview as much as I've enjoyed recording it, because it reinforces the work that I do with companies when they want to grow fast, they want to create strong cultures, they want to have better retention rates, and they want to increase or accelerate growth. As always, lead with courage. I'll see you next time.